we are going to jump right in. It is such a pleasure to see everybody tonight. Erev Tov. Yeah, thanks, I'm recording. Okay, great. So I wanted to let you know that in the slide presentation, you're going to see a lot of different handouts. That's why I asked you to bring a pen and paper. At the very end of tonight's presentation, I'm going to share a link with all of you in the chat, and that's going to give you access to everything that I'm sharing tonight. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to jump in. You know that my favorite part of the first day of school each year is seeing how ecstatic every child is to start the new year fresh. New shoes, new school supplies, new backpacks, and the convergence of Rosh Hashana with the start of a new school year, especially this year, is just right. And understandably, this year, I felt it even more than ever. All of the planning and preparation and prayers that led up to the opening day in person, coupled with seeing the sheer joy of the children to be back in school and their ability to follow the social distancing and the mask wearing rules, reminds me of the strength that each and every one of us possesses. As we begin a new school year and approach Rosh Hashana, we have hopes, dreams, and goals for ourselves and for our families. How do we act upon our hopes for our kids in a healthy manner? And how do we talk about Teshuva to our children? How do we help them along this sometimes complicated journey at this time of year specifically and always? But before we start talking about Teshuva and growth for our kids, we all need to first talk about ourselves, because it would really be easy for any one of us to sit down right now and write a list about each of our kids and our spouses and all the areas in which we think they need to grow. But really, we need to start with the list for ourselves. And that will leave as homework for after the workshop. I find that one of the most beautiful and humbling aspects of parenting is the opportunity for us, for we parents, to grow along with our children, to become more aware of our own strengths and weaknesses, and to hone them as we raise our kids. Because as I like to say, we are all works in progress. And this is an important starting point. I think I can safely say on behalf of all of us here, I could say two things. One is that we're creatures of habit, and two, that we have the tendency to at times develop blind spots to our shortcomings, and believing that we come across the way we intend and hope to be coming across, even though that might not be the case in reality. I'll share an example from just this very Shabbat. I asked my son to set the table for Shabbat lunch, and he started. And then about a minute later, I said, oh, could you also please clear the kitchen table? And he very politely said, Mom, it's like easier for me to do one thing at a time. And I said, oh, you're right, I'm sorry. And there I was with the reminder that I was coming across in a way that I didn't intend to be coming across, which was that I was like rushing him and giving him too much to do at the same time, and that I needed to slow down in the moment. Modeling and expressing that we are works in progress reminds ourselves and our kids that we are human. And this perspective allows us to approach Teshuva in a more genuine and vulnerable manner. The more self-aware we are, the more in touch we are with the reality that all of us have plenty of growing to do, then the better job we can do at taking a step back and truly understanding who each and every one of our kids are and what their starting points are. Because we're all born with tendencies. Now, each of us has a different set of life circumstances. We're all in different places with each of our kids. So let's start with some personal reflecting and goal setting. I am not going to ask you to share this out because I think this is personal. And let's look at these three questions. If you can grab your pen and paper and jot down answers to these three questions, that would be great. Number one, in terms of your parenting practice, what are your greatest hopes for this year? Next Rosh Hashanah, What do you want your children to say about their relationship with you this year? And question number 3, if there was only one thing for you to learn this year and you knew that this one thing would make a difference for your kids, what would it be? I'm going to give everybody a minute to fill out their paper, and then you'll be able to continue working on this after the workshop's over. But before we start the workshop, it's important to take this minute now and just jot down 1 or 2 minutes to jot that down. Thirty more seconds. Five. Okay. This work was an important start. Teshuva is about coming back to our best selves, lashuv, to return, and to resolve to be the best that we can be. What more can any of us want from ourselves or from our children than to be the absolute best that we or they can be? It sounds simple, but like all achievements in life, it requires effort. So let's get practical and break it down. Tonight, we're going to talk about 4 strategies that I believe can help our kids grow this time of year and always. 1, acceptance. 2, helping our kids know themselves. 3, setting long-term goals, long-term character goals for our kids. And 4, empowering our kids with a can-do attitude. And we're going to take these one at a time. Okay, number 1, becoming the best that we can be and helping our children achieve the same first involves acceptance of who we are and of who our children are. And only then can we construct a game plan and think about teshuva and growth. You know, children pick up on their parents' emotional vibes. I really am a fan of this book. It's called Living with Kids by Miriam Adahan. And I'm going to quote from her tonight from this book. She says, parents don't have to actually say, I can't stand you. It's enough to think, I wish he was different. And kids pick up on their parents' emotional vibes instantly. So what can we do about our child's shortcomings? First and foremost, we need to be accepting of who he or she is at this moment. That doesn't mean he or she won't do better tomorrow, but we need to remember that today is a mere page in the long book called life. But we must accept him as he is today, or he will turn off to us completely in an attempt to protect himself from the pain of our rejection. Believe in the power of yet. This shortcoming does not define who she or he is. This is not the whole child. This is a tendency. And we limit our children if we view them as lazy or clumsy or disorganized or selfish. Let's remember once again that we are all works in progress and that there's lots of room for compensation and for corrections for all of us. Because when we tell a child, don't be lazy or don't be mean, you know what the child hears? They hear, don't be. We need to be patient with ourselves as this is difficult spiritual work. And to help yourself become more accepting, keep telling yourself, he's really doing the best he can with the tools he has at the moment, given his inborn temperament, the conditioning of the home and society, and the various pains and pressures in his internal and external worlds. When you approach your child with respect for who he or she is, they feel loved, because love is acceptance. And if he feels loved, he is far more likely to listen to what you have to say regarding the areas that still need growth. You know why? Because he or she won't be so busy defending themselves from the parents' hostility. Also, let's not be in such a hurry to make our children perfect. Process, process, process. Like I said earlier, children are affected by a myriad of circumstances over which we have no control, right? Birth order, our innate predispositions, their innate predispositions, such as a tendency to be shy or nervous or aggressive or domineering or dramatic or overly emotional. Ultimately, we can only control our own behavior. We can only model good values and pray and hope that our children will want to emulate us. And when we focus on acceptance, we become realistic and we won't try to turn our fun-loving, adventurous, non-cerebral child into an introverted, serious, studious child who wants to read all day. The message that we want to convey is you are loved unconditionally and you are capable, okay? So part of acceptance is operating on the premise that we have to free our kids and ourselves from labels. And let's talk a little bit about how we can do this, okay? We need to view each person, including ourselves, as one with a wide range of possibilities and potential. And we have to believe that the potential for the opposite of what we see is there, despite tendencies, despite inborn dispositions. Again, what we see at times in ourselves and in our children is not the whole them and it's not the whole us. And let's not allow a weakness to define who we are or who our child is. So how can we help our children break free from these labels? I want to share another favorite book of mine that I highly recommend. I very often do not have this book in my house because it's one of those books that I'm just constantly lending out and I just can't remember where it is. So I finally just started buying copies for other people and buying extra copies for me to have at home. It's Faber and Maslish's How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk. So we're going to talk now about the fact that we have to, again, begin with the premise that our child has a whole range of possible behaviors, okay? We're gonna move to 7 strategies that we can work on to help free our children from labels, and this is from Faber and Maslach. As you see, number 1 says, look for opportunities to show this child a new picture of him or herself. Let me give you a tip. We are looking for the opposite to show the child a new picture of him or herself. So for example, if there's a child in your family that's labeled as irresponsible, you might want to say, wow, with everything on your mind, you remember to check the lost and found for your gloves. That's what I call responsibility, right? So you have like magnifying glasses on looking for the opposite of what you think the label might be. Let's move on to number 2. Put your child in a situation where they can see themselves differently. So you might ask your kid who's labeled as disorganized to help you reorganize a food cabinet. Now, we have to remember to be explicit and clear in our instructions so that they can do it successfully. And when they're done, in a non-evaluative manner, just describing what we saw, we would say something like, you've helped me organize 4 shelves of cans that were all mixed up. It will be so much easier to find things in here now. Number 3, let children overhear you say something positive about them to their grandparents or to your spouse. So for example, let's say one of your kids has a tendency to be kvetchy. So you might be talking to your mom on the phone and have your child, you have to say it in a genuine way. Mom, you should have seen Danny take his allergy shot today. He took that shot. You know, those shots could really, really hurt, Mom. And he just talked himself right through it, and he managed straight through with a lot of strength. Tip number 4 to help break our kids from a label. Model the behavior that you would like to see. So let's say you have a kid who's not so flexible. They're struggling with flexibility. So if we're stuck in traffic driving somewhere, we might say to our child, this traffic is out of our control. We'll get there when we get there. Like we're just, we're spelling out for the child what we're going to do. Or I'm reorganizing something in my house and I have a child who's not organized, and I'm going to spell out exactly, in order for me to organize the playroom, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to first separate the toys into categories, and then one at a time, right? So then I'm modeling it for them. Number 5, we want to be a storehouse for our child's special moments. So the kid comes home from school and says, I could not get up the ropes today. And the kid called me not coordinated, and we were on that ropes course in day camp. So as a parent, I could say, clearly that kid doesn't know you as well as I do, because I remember the first time you rode a two-wheeler, you mastered it quickly and you were off to the races. Number 6, when a child behaves according to his label, state your feelings and expectations without an edge, from a place of self-regulation. So if you have a child who has a tendency to have difficulty sharing and they finish up all the cookies that you bought and really wanted to have around for all your other kids, you would say a statement like, the cookies were meant to be shared with the whole family. I expect you to be able to say no to yourself. Or if you have a child who wrecks things, it bothers me to see this new train track stepped on and bent. I expect them to be put back in their box when they're not being used. Okay, so we're just stating our expectations and our feelings. And number 7, think of ways that this quality can be directed in a positive manner. So a kid who's very strong and sometimes maybe even uses their strength to a little bit too much, well, let's get that kid helping carrying groceries and vacuuming and feeling good about their strength. The first day back at SIR with our staff was a very emotional day. We were about 200 strong on the field, and Rabbi Krause asked each administrator to share a few words with the staff for that first day back. And within seconds after he slapped me, I knew exactly what I wanted to share with the staff. It was something that I heard a few years back from Rabbi Yecheskel Abramsky, who was from London originally, who talks about the first words that we say every morning. We wake up and I say Moda ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam, shechazarta bi nishmati b'chema rabba emunatecha. I know that especially now during COVID, I think we're all extremely focused on gratitude, but I focused on the last 2 words, which is a message for us and our parenting as well. Rabba emunatecha. Have you ever heard about the Emunah of Hashem? Rabba emunatecha. We think about our emunah, building up our faith, strengthening our faith. But what does that mean, Rabba emunatecha? And Rabbi Yecheskel Abramsky explained that the emunah that is Rabbah of Hashem is referring to Hashem's emunah in us. That Hashem restored our soul that morning. We were granted another day of life because Hashem has confidence in us that we could use our talents and make today meaningful. And I shared with the staff that as we embark upon this challenging year, we could be strengthened by the fact that Hashem believes in us. We can do it. And I want us to feel that way as parents also. As daunting as child rearing is and as many challenges and bumps in the road there are, Rabba emunatecha. We should be strengthened by the fact that Hashem believes in our abilities. And again, back here to Miriam Adahan, she also reminds us to think about the Elokai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. Hashem, the neshama, the soul that you gave me is pure. And the greatest gift that we can give our children, besides believing in ourselves that we can help them, is to help ourselves and them recognize that neshama tehorah. It's a gift that we can give our children, our spouses, our friends. I recognize your godly core. Now, I don't have to say it in those words, but I want to interact with them in a way that they see that I'm seeing their godly core. And our job as parents is to help our children grow that godly core, help them get in touch with that feeling of strength and goodness and adequacy. So freeing ourselves and our kids from labels comes with the responsibility to make changes, right? We don't want to be one of those people that makes comments like, oh, I just don't have any self-control. No wonder I scream at my kids all the time. I think underneath a lot of those kind of comments is that people don't think they're good enough to change. They're not believing enough in the power of yet. And every single human being has to feel that he or she has within him a core of inner greatness, which is inviolable. We are all really good at our core, and Teshuva is coming back to that, accepting who we are and who our children are, and freeing ourselves and our kids from labels is the first step of our helping our kids on their journey. Now, sometimes people mistakenly define that goodness incorrectly, and I'll illustrate that with a true story. This story actually happened to me more than once, but the most recent time that it happened was pre-COVID when I was disembarking from a plane. And I overheard a woman say to somebody, another woman who was holding a baby in the aisle, oh, your baby is so good. She was so quiet this whole flight. And the part about those comments that bother me is like, why is that the definition of a good baby? Because that baby didn't bother you? Because that baby's ears weren't hurting during landing, so that baby cried less, and that baby is better than a baby who's crying? Like, we don't want to be defining goodness based on the needs of other people, of annoyance, of comfort or discomfort. We want to be genuine and to find goodness in looking inside of who our child really is. So this is tough, especially with the yontif coming and, you know, grandparents possibly coming and spending time with us, probably in masks, that in order to help our children develop to be the best that they can be, we need to take ourselves and everybody else, our neighbors, our friends, our relatives, we need to move everybody out of the center, and we have to move our kids to the center. Now, I'm not proposing that we raise self-centered children, but rather that we appreciate and accept our children for who they are. So let's summarize number one. Love is acceptance. Acceptance can happen if we free our kids from labels, and we need to put our kids at the center and move everybody else to the side. We're going to move on now to number two, which is helping our kids understand who they are in the world. Helping kids understand their tendency is a starting point to help them understand who or what they can become. What are their strengths, their gifts, their challenges? Because helping them understand who they are, again, not confusing this with locking them into roles, which we just spoke about because we spoke about freeing them from labels. So let me just give you an example. Let's take a child who can be anxious in new situations. So if this child recognizes this tendency about him or herself, she can be empowered and conscious when it manifests itself and come up with a plan. And she can create this plan together with you a few days before starting gymnastics or karate or school. You can ask questions that will encourage this child to brainstorm and to formulate a plan to ease the transition. Let's say you have a child who has a really hard time sharing and a guest is coming over. Before the guest comes over, the friend comes over for a play date, you could talk about strategies. The child who has a hard time sitting for a long time, who's getting a little bit older, and you're bringing them to shul, you might make a strategy, create a strategy or a plan with them that, let's say in shul, in the middle of Kriyat HaTorah, let's say after the fourth aliyah, you can go out for a few minutes and have a break, and I'm even packing a snack for you. It helps them get to know themselves. And by helping our kids do this, we can promote giving and growing from a place of joy and efficacy. My son started Hunter 2 weeks ago, the Graduate School for Social Work, and he shared this excerpt from Dr. Eric Fromm at the Shabbat table, and it really resonated for me in thinking about this. Just to give context, he's talking about giving and about the fact that many people view giving as an act of sacrifice, and that the normative view is like that it's better to give than to receive because it's better to suffer deprivation than to experience joy. But here's his quote and his take, and I think this is really true. He writes, "For the productive character, giving is the highest expression of potency. In the very act of giving, I experience my strength, my wealth, my power. This experience of heightened vitality fills me with joy. I experience myself as overflowing, as alive and joyous. Giving is more joyous than receiving, not because it's a deprivation, but because the act of giving lies in the expression of my aliveness." And this resonated for me because if our kids understand who they are, they'll feel good about the ways that they can use their strengths, and it will feel like it's less effort and more empowering and fulfilling when they share of themselves. I want to share with you now a slide that I learned about at a workshop that I went to this summer by Lily Howard. And this is a slide, again, I'm sharing everything at the end, so you'll have access to this, called Inner and Outer Swirls. And I included here a sample of how a child filled it out. And again, this might not work for everybody, but I'm trying to share lots of different strategies that you can consider. But the outer swirls are what is apparent to other people in the world, who you are and what people see right away. And the inner, what you would draw with the child inside, might be feelings that they're having or character traits that they're working on developing. And if it works, this might be a tool that you could use to help your child come to a good, joyous understanding of who they are in the world, right? So we first need to accept our children and love them unconditionally. We need to free them from labels. We can help them understand their tendencies and their style. And then we're ready to move on to number 3, which is we need to think about the goals that we have in mind for our child's development. Now, these goals, like I said in the intro, need to be long-term goals, okay? The focus is not on the milk not spilling this time, but rather the long-term goal for the child who has a tendency to be impulsive, for this child to learn how to strategize and self-regulate and find solutions, right? So that might be something like, when the milk container is half full, what is a strategy that you might use in that case when you're pouring by yourself to not spill? Let's begin with an example about hakarat tov. Many of us feel like, thank God our kids are really blessed. We want them to be more grateful and appreciative of all the gifts in their lives. So the imposed behavior would be say thank you. But the long-term goal is for our children to experience hakarat tov, for them to have a sense of appreciation in a profound way throughout their lives. So we need to be honest with ourselves, right? It's not about my kid looking good or polite or making us look like we're such great parents because they say thank you. But rather, if we put our kid at the center, we can think about, this is not just about thank you. How is the strategy going to work with this headset that I'm going to help my kid develop hakarat hatov, appreciation? So first I need to reflect on what my kid should appreciate. And then I have to figure out a way to inspire that. So let's say the grandparents are meeting us for dinner in a restaurant and they're taking us out for dinner on Sunday night. So on the way over to the restaurant in the car, I could point out to my kids, it's really gracious of Saba and Safta to take us out to dinner. It's adding such a nice element to our day, right? And then maybe at the end of the meal when we're getting our jackets, I might say, that was such nice family time. That was such fun. I feel so grateful to Saba and Safta for treating us to such a delicious dinner. And our kids might say, yeah, that was fun. And then I might say something like, oh, here's Saba and Safta. They're back here right now. Now, a kid will most often pick up on a cue and say thank you. But the emphasis was on the substance to inspire the words. It's the thank you is more of a side point that comes afterwards. It's like the technical piece. It's like nice to say it. Go light on the say thank you, because it's not about me. It's about educating my child. And when is it preferable for them to express it? I don't know. It depends who your kid is. You might have a kid who's too shy or too overwhelmed to say it in the moment. And maybe as the parent, you just model it them and say, thank you on behalf of all of our kids. This was such a nice dinner. Maybe the scenario continues at home. And when you go to home, it's like, any ideas of what we can do to say thank you to Saba and Sapta for that dinner? And maybe one kid who likes to bake is going to bake muffins, and another might make a card or say, oh, I'm going to call them on the phone. But we have to know who our kids are and make it about the long-term goal. So again, the guiding question you want to ask yourself in these kinds of circumstances is my parenting technique in this moment in line with my long-term goal? Because if we merely say to our child, say thank you, it will have been a lost opportunity for a teaching moment. Here's another example. Say sorry, right? If the sorry is not coming from a place of remorse, then what is it worth? We want the sentiment, not the lip service. So think long-term. What are the qualities that we want to develop to help our children become successful adults, right? So my goal is to awaken sensitivity in my child rather than to force the behavior of saying sorry upon them. So this brings us to our next topic, and in helping our child develop to be the best that they can be, and that is number 4, which is empowering our children with a can-do attitude. A child who feels accepted and safe and secure can develop the confidence to find solutions to problems that arise and believe that they can change. Now, this is integral to helping a child develop to be the best that he or she can be. We need to empower them to believe in their ability to grow. Now, conditioning can be strong, I get that. But with hard work and paradigm shifts, it can happen. Change can happen. Dynamics can change. Scripts that keep repeating in the household can change. And unused muscles can be strengthened. You know, when we want to communicate to our children, when they're unhappy or bored, or they have a conflict, or they just demonstrated a destructive impulse, the best thing we want to do is focus on solutions, right? So we should also think about modeling it for our kids. And this example is brought down right here. Like, I go to my closet and I take out a flashlight to use, and I see that the flashlight isn't broken. Modeling thinking about the solution is so helpful to my kids. So instead of just saying, oh, let me order a new flashlight, or I have no idea what to do with this, or, oh, let me ask mom, she's so handsy in the house, she'll be the one to fix it. Let's model for our kids. Let me take out the batteries. Let me try to figure this out. Why isn't this flashlight working? Because I think that the ability to make decisions, the ability to be a problem solver, that gives all of us, not only children, a sense of inner mastery and of self-confidence and self-esteem, right? When we feel competent and capable, then we could feel a positive sense of self-esteem. It'll also reduce levels of anxiety for our kids and increase their level of confidence. It's like this can-do attitude, and we want to grow that in our kids, right? You might be familiar with the term teacup children. We don't want to be figuring everything out for our kids. It's like they're like a teacup because we don't want them to break. We think they're so overly fragile. We're not doing them a service if we do that. You might want to read The Blessing of a Skinned Knee by Wendy Mogul. She talks about that if you haven't read that yet. So problem solving is one of the most important skills that we can teach our kids, because your kid and my kid does not like being out of control and does not like feeling out of control. It's scary. Hitting them or sending them to their room accomplishes nothing. It stops the behavior in that second, but it doesn't teach them how to solve a problem in the future. As we said earlier, we're focusing on the long-term goal. We should not be the source of control. Rather, we need to help our child realize that they have the ability to develop the self-control and the decision-making skills to minimally get through bumps in the road and to maximally turn stumbling blocks into building blocks. If you have preschool kids or up to second grade, you might consider creating a book. You could even do it on like Snapfish or a Google book, and take the kid's first name, and the title of the book is Noah Finds Solutions. And you could put a picture of your child on the cover and fill the book with different scenarios. Your child can help you create the book, and you could reread this book with your child again and again to reinforce their ability to problem solve. And they could be actors, and you're taking pictures of them that you're putting in the book, and they're like the star. So I think that can make them feel really good. I've seen that really work very, very nicely. We can do a great deal to avoid instilling a failure mentality in our kids. One important thing for us to remember, as tired as we might be at the end of a day of work, is to make sure not to get hysterical over trivial mistakes. For example, if something breaks or something spills, it just needs to be cleaned up or fixed. Like sometimes things spill, and it needs to be about my kid, not about me and my need for a perfectly clean house, because it is normal for an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old, not only a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, to spill or to drop something and for it to break. That's really not a big deal. It's not a big deal for a child to forget to wipe their feet after they're playing outside. So when that happens, we want to figure out a solution. We want to verbalize the process and model it for our kids, because kids that grow up in an environment where parents get hysterical over trivial mistakes end up thinking it's a disaster to make a mistake. I won't even try. Or it's a disaster to be rejected, so I'll try to be what others want me to be, instead of developing my own unique talents. And we don't want our kids to ever think that they only deserve love if they do everything perfectly, because this kind of thinking is really crippling emotionally for our kids. Now, there will be times when our kids are driving us crazy. That is true. What do we do in that situation? First is to step away. Rather do nothing and say nothing than say something or do something that you'll regret later. In these moments when, dare I say, you're so frustrated with your child's behavior that you need to work really hard to remind yourself that you love your kid, here's my favorite rule of thumb. Ready? When your child is least lovable is when they need your love the most. When our children are least lovable, they need our love the most. And if we respond to misbehavior with hostility, we're just creating a vicious cycle. Our kid feels rejected, they'll misbehave again to test our love again. We got to look for that divine spark, that neshama tehorah. At times it's like, where is that neshama tehorah? It seems really deeply buried. But guess what? We're the adults here, and it's our job to look for it. That's our responsibility. We are parents. That's our most important job in the world, to look for it. Also, it's important to differentiate between like serious issues, like one sibling making another sibling feeling unsafe, or just regular childhood stuff. Like, we have to remember that defiance, wildness, inattention, fidgeting, if a child's not cooperating one day, we shouldn't rush to assume it's rejection or disrespect. Like, these are normal childhood activities that need to be dealt with firmly, but lovingly, and we can't personalize it. It's really important. We also need to make sure that our children know how to do what it is that we're asking them to do. Because if we want them to be action agents and we want them to be problem solvers, we can't just say to a kid, go clean your room. Because there might be a few kids in the world that are so naturally organized and their executive functioning skills are so strong that they could just naturally walk into a room and clean up. But for most of us, it's not like that. And we need to really explicitly model our expectations of exactly how you do it, and then put the stress on the effort and the hard work, not only on the product. And we can't assume that it's like we just naturally assume that it's going to be done. We have to say, you know, I recognize that it takes hard work. And the harder you work at practicing this, the better you're going to get at this. Right? So let's model that ourselves. Let's confront our own deficiency and capitalize on mistakes that we make with our kids and show them things that are hard for us to do and the strategies that we use to try to do that better. Oh, you know what I do in the kitchen on Erev Shabbat so that I can keep track of all the different things in the oven because it's really hard for me? I use the Alexa and I use a timer on the kitchen clock. And between that really helps me get everything out of the oven. Let's model, let's be real, let's be vulnerable. We're all human. Another thing to keep in mind is that when we're focusing on helping our child develop competency, we need to be satisfied with less than perfect. And this is hard as part of the growth process because often, it is so much easier to do something ourselves because we know that it's going to get done correctly right away. So for example, wiping down a table, making a bed, cleaning up a game that our kid left out. It's like so tempting to just do it and have it done. But if we want our kid to learn how to do it, we have to take a deep breath and hang in there for the process. And we all know that just as when we exercise, our muscles get larger and stronger, so do our brains and so do our character traits. And I'm going to repeat it again. We want to foster growth mindset. We want to praise effort. We want to praise persistence despite setback. And we want to emphasize strategies and choices. You chose to offer your sister a drink first, even though you opened the fridge to get yourself a drink and you were very thirsty. Or you chose a difficult Erev Shabbat task or Shabbat cleanup task. And when they do, comment on the process, not on the intelligence, not on the talent. You must have tried or you must have worked very hard versus, oh, you're very smart or you're very good at this, right? Avoid, you're so smart, you're so gifted. Focus more on the process. Now, we've all been parenting for a few years now, and we have all made our share of mistakes because we are human. So we should not be feeling guilty about this. We might have labeled some of our children. Even if we didn't do it to them, maybe we've done it in our own minds, or we've said it to our spouse or to our siblings or to our parents. How do we move past that? How do we start fresh? We need to apply the same principles that we reviewed tonight to ourselves. And I'm going to go back to Faber and Maislish now and quote them. And they say, every time a parent says to themselves, like, I messed up. Why didn't I think to say this? Why didn't I do that? Thank God we automatically get another chance. Just like Hashem gives us another chance when we do Teshuva. It's okay to say you're sorry to our kids. It's more than okay. It's human and it's genuine and it's appropriate. Our life with our children is open-ended. We have their whole lifetime and our whole lifetime ahead of us to repair. There's always another opportunity later in the hour, later in the day, later in the week to say, you know, I don't feel like I gave you my full attention this morning in the car when you were talking to me about the kids teasing you the day before. I realized that it must have been upsetting to you that I was distracted. I'd love to hear about it. Can we chat about it now? Because compassion is always appreciated, even if at times it comes a bit later rather than sooner. Teshuva is a gift for all of us. And I'd like to now share a few practical ideas that will promote these principles that we spoke about tonight. And I've been feeling like I'm talking for a while, so I'm going to also, be very happy to be taking your questions. In the workshop that I went to this summer, Lily Howard created this heart map, which I think I shared this with our teachers also. I think it can be shared in so many creative ways. A parent can put their child's name in the middle and write many things they love about their child. Your child can use it to fill out things together with you. It could be done with pictures or words, things that they are grateful for, people they love. Or later on in the presentation, we're going to get to talking about their hopes and dreams for the new year. We're looking for ways to help our children see who they are and how good we think they are. Moving right along, these cards, which were created by Miriam Adahan, can be used in a number of ways. Many years back, Michelle Coburn and I sat down and we brainstormed for our kids lots of different ideas. And the next few that I'm going to share, a lot of them are an outgrowth of the conversation that we had. So if you see on these cards, and again, I'm going to share these with you, you could see, I can find solutions. I'm practicing patience. I can make good choices. I am acting in a responsible way. I am practicing self-control. Now, each of our kids are different, so we know that we're working on different things with different kids. But by having, these are different things that we want to work on, right? So you can have these, you can use these cards in lots of different ways. You can have them up on your refrigerator with a magnet in honor of Rosh Hashana, and a kid can pick off what it is that they are working on to raise their level of consciousness. And you could use these cards in a number of creative ways. Another thing that we do, and I have a picture of this right now to show you, but we create these posters. Now, I would say based on your child's age and what the kids in your house are working on, you would pick the topic that you want that poster to have. So for example, it might be, we are grateful for, or stepping up and assuming responsibility, or sharing, or practicing self-control. Now, if you kept this up all year, it would lose its charm and it would lose its excitement. So my recommendation is to go out, get some oak tag and different color sticky notes, and set up 3 or 4 posters in your kitchen now, in the days leading up to Rosh Hashanah, and let your kids know that it'll be up from now until Yom Kippur. What does this accomplish? It raises a level of awareness of the midot that we're promoting. And it could also be really funny, and consider the ages and temperaments when you're choosing what to write. But like, my kids have filled it up with such fun things. So like, I'll just give you some examples that have come out on ours, like for practicing self-control. You know, I stopped after 2 peanut butter Rice Krispie treats. For the sharing, I shared my muffin with Abba on the way to school. Practicing stepping up and assuming responsibility. I did my homework even though I didn't want to. I shared my Shabbat shirt with my brother. Gratitude, I was able to sneak eating breakfast in class today. One of my kids wrote for what they're grateful for, tickling and laughter. So that's, you know, those are some really nice ways that we could use these. By the way, I just want to give you one other idea that you could use the cards for that we spoke about before. You could put those cards on the Yom Tov table on Rosh Hashanah, and a child could pick something that they want to work on, and they can give an example or a scenario to describe what it'll look like in action. Another idea that I'd like to share is, now leading up to Rosh Hashanah, remember we spoke about the fact that we have to look for that goodness in our child. And we all know that there are some kids of ours that it might be easier for us to look for it in than others. Well, the ones that it's harder to look it in for is our responsibility to look even more deeply. Take notes. Notice good things that your kids are doing this week in areas that are particularly challenging for them. And take it upon yourself to be descriptive, not evaluative, and to try to write one thing each day for your kids. And then you can write a letter to your child and give it to them before Rosh Hashanah. I gave you a little bit of a script. You'll obviously want to write it in your own way, but you're talking about the fact in the letter, the message that I want to get across to my kids is, Like Rosh Hashanah is the day that Hashem created people. And on this special day, I want to point out some actions that I've observed just this week alone that I know will remind you of your great potential and your divine spark. So again, you might want to use that heart for this as well. Rosh Hashanah is about deciding to be the best that we can be. And we believe that with continued hard work, you will bring so much goodness to our family and to the world this year. And you might want to include the notes right there. The next idea that I'd like to share is to buy index cards. This has really worked very successfully in my family. And when the children are young, they fill out the index cards with your direction. But again, the parental involvement depends on the age and temperament of the child. And on top of each index card, you give a category. So it's like people that I am davening for, an area that I want to work on, what I want to daven for the Jewish people, ways I acted this year that make me feel proud, things I want to thank Hashem for. Again, for very young children, you might want to use that gratitude heart for this also, and then change it into a Rosh Hashanah heart, hopes for this year. And for children that are old enough to daven with a machzor, they could put the card in the machzor. And if the children are younger, you could actually read the cards with them when you daven together. And what's really nice is to give the children a new envelope each year and have last year's cards in the envelope so that a child could work off of what they wrote about last year, which is also really powerful. And you'll see that within a few years, your kids are going to start asking you for the index cards, and they're going to start doing this naturally. Next, we only have shofar this year on one day, but you might want to sit with your child before, prepare them for the davening. It's also nice to have music in your house in the days leading up to Rosh Hashanah that has the sound of the Rosh Hashanah davening. And I like to categorize it into 3 sections because I think about the fact that I want my kids and myself to remember that just like we received the Torah on Har Sinai with sounds of the shofar, when we hear the shofar in shul, we want to remember that we too are personally accepting the Torah upon ourselves. We want to remember that Hashem is the king of the world. And we want to remember that Rosh Hashanah are the first 2 days of Aseret Yemei Teshuva. And it's time for us to really work on ourselves and on becoming the best that we could be. So if it works for your kids, again, I'm giving you a big smorgasbord. You'll take what works for you to talk about that, for them to draw pictures in that, and then to print it out and bring it with them to shul when they hear the shofar. That could help make the shofar blowing meaningful to them. On this slide, I share a sampling, but I share all of them with you, and I will reshare them again with the lower school before a Yom Kippur. These are cards with different ideas that your kids can do on Erev Yom Kippur. You can cut them out. You could have your kid cut them out. You could have them pick what are some of the cards that that your child wants to take upon themselves on Erev Yom Kippur, reminding them that it's such a special day. So I would love to summarize here before I take questions. Teshuva is about recognizing the divine spark, the godliness, the goodness within us, and the potential that each of us has to be the best that we can be. And the best way for us to begin to accomplish this for ourselves and for our kids is to do 4 things: to accept and love ourselves and our children for who they are and for who we are today. 2, to put our children at the center, to help our children understand who they are and to think long term when setting goals. 3, to develop character traits rather than impose behaviors. And 4, to teach children how to find solutions to problems that arise and promote the mindset that effort and hard work yield success. And finally, to remember that we are all works in progress. I like to remember that there's a dual character to Rosh Hashanah. There's trepidation, but there's also optimism. Rosh Hashanah is a positive day. We have it within us to correct mishaps and to move forward. And the shofar itself propels us forward. Rav Yaakov Ariel from Israel points out that it's true that the day is called Yom Teruah, And the Teruah are the broken up sounds, or the shake it up, shake yourself up sounds. But let's remember that a tekiah always comes before and after a teruah or a shvarim, because our goal, the goal on Rosh Hashana, is not brokenness. It's not yesh, God forbid. The state of being shaken up is not the goal. It's just a means to bring us to a place of tikkun. The smooth sound of the tekiah that follows the broken ones of the teruah give us hope. And that final tekiah, that tekiah gedola, is meant to put us in a place that we know and feel like we can become more complete, more mushlam. And when we blow that shofar on Rosh Hashanah, like we said a few minutes ago, and we coronate Hashem, it's also a day that we coronate man. Because he or she who comes to the place of recognizing Hashem, which is our work for the day, reaches a place of seeing his or her own spiritual potential and greatness, revealing our Tselem Elokim, which can help us reach great heights. So Rosh Hashanah is a day of hope, and it's a day of recognizing the tremendous potential that we have to live a life of meaning and to fill our lives with meaning. In this slide right here, and I'm going to put it in the chat right now, is a link to all of the resources that we shared tonight. And I'm just going to, yes, you want to put it in the chat? We're going to just copy this. And if you print this out, you will see that this is a PDF of everything that I shared tonight. And I'm so happy now to answer questions. Anyone who wants to go can definitely go, but please feel free to unmute yourself to ask a question and to drop questions in the chat now, and I will be so happy to answer all of them. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Okay, let's get those questions rolling in the chat, or unmute yourself and feel free to ask them.